What's up, YouTube? In today's live stream, we're going to be recreating sort of this marquee text, and we're going to build it in a way where we can add however many words we want into this. It just keeps on looping through until it restarts for the first word in the list. So we're going to go ahead and set that up today, and I linked the clonable in the description below if you'd like to check that out. So the first thing we're going to do inside Webflow, I'm going to add in a div and give it the class of Marquee. We're going to need to give this sort of a height. I'll give it a height of 12em for now. And inside of that div, we'll have another div, and we'll give this the class of Marquee track. So this element here is going to be 100% width and 100% height of its parent. So that just sort of fills up the space, and we can also do position relative. So inside the Marquee track is where we can have our marquee item. And this, again, is 100% width and height of its parent. I just put flex to center and text align center on it like so. So inside that, I'm going to add a heading, and I'll tag this h2, and let me just give it the class of marquee text. It just has a font size like that. So that's inside my item right here. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and make this sort of a symbol called item, or maybe marquee item. And let me go ahead and let's say link this to a field within the symbol called title. And now I should be able to easily just change out this text. So I'll call this one design. And let's go ahead and duplicate this item here. And I'll call this one develop. And let's duplicate another one here. Let's just call this one build. So if we select the item, you see here's the track, and then here is the marquee parent. So the track is 100% width and height. The item is covering the width and height. So that's pretty much this height is being defined on the marquee. What we can do is set the marquee to relative and overflow hidden, and it's going to crop off all of the excess items like so. And then if we select the track and we give it a transform of maybe negative 100%, then you'll see that pulls up by exactly the height of the track. So we're seeing exactly the next item in view there. And if we do negative 200%, we should see exactly the third item in view here. Now we need to be able to slide this from build back up to the word design, but we don't want to see it, gradually slide to design past all these other ones. So the way we can solve that is by basically copying the first headline and putting another copy below. So what our animation is going to do is it'll start at 0%, it'll animate up to negative 100%, so we're seeing headline 2. It'll animate up again to negative 200%, we're seeing headline 3. And then it'll animate to negative 300%. And we're seeing that first word again since we made a fourth copy down here. So after it's done with that, we'll have it instantly reset back to the 0% position. So it looks like it hasn't moved at all. So that's kind of how we can create the illusion of the infinite loop. Negative 100, negative 200, negative 300, and then we will reset to 0 after that. And that's how we're going to animate this. So what I'm going to do is I've already linked up sort of, the GSAP library and a code sandbox file. So I'll just go ahead and publish this, and we can start working on building out our animations here. All right, so we have this published. I'm going to close out that example. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a timeline. We'll say let timeline equal gsap.timeline. And inside, we're going to open up the timeline settings. We're going to set repeat to -1. That just means it's going to infinitely loop forever. It's just going to keep going on and on. And then the element we want to animate, we're going to create sort of a tween on our timeline. We'll do a 2 animation, and we want to animate sort of this marquee track right here. So that'll be the element we're targeting. And we want to animate it on the y-axis. So we'll do y%. We want to animate to negative 100%. And then we're going to add another step here. So We can do to negative 200%, then to negative 300%, and then it'll just reset. It'll replay this. So if we were to save that, you'll notice it switches those out like so. And this is just infinitely looping. But we do need to slow this down a bit. We could apply, sort of a duration to each point one by one. So let's go ahead. Hey, Raphael, thanks for joining the stream. Yeah, so we could apply durations to each one of these, but that's going to get a little repetitive. So what we can do instead is set defaults, and we can apply a default duration that will apply to every tween in here unless we override it. So we'll say the default duration is 1, so we don't need to apply anything like this. And then we do want a little bit of a pause before each animation happens, because right now it's kind of instantly just moving into the next one. So for that, we can apply a delay to each one of these tweens. So we'll delay each one of them by a second as well. And if we refresh, so we have a second pause before it slides into the next one. It's pausing a second each time. And I'm going to use sort of an in-out ease. I'm using the GSAP ease visualizer. I'm going to do expo, so it's really extreme. We have very little change at the beginning and end. And so I'll just throw that ease in here. It'll apply to all of those. So if we refresh, now it should be a bit more dramatic. If this word slide in, then the next word, and then design, and then it resets, and it keeps on looping. So that basically sets this step up the way we want it to work. But what happens if maybe we want another marquee in here? So I'll just add this one in. So first of all, what if we want less words in this one? So maybe I'll just do, we'll say 2 words in this one, design and develop. And then again, we need our copy of the first word here at the bottom. So if we save that, you'll notice what's going to happen here. Let's go ahead and refresh. So this one's working just fine. It loops. This one, after it goes to design, it slides up into an empty space before it resets because it's missing a word here, right? So what if we wanted this to work no matter how many sections we have on the page, no matter how many items we have in here? That's where we need to make this a little bit more dynamic, especially if you're using a CMS. So let's go ahead and work on that part next. I think what we're going to do is we'll grab a jQuery each loop, and this will just allow us to make repeatable interactions. So we're going to loop through every marquee element on the page. So there's 2 of them right now. We'll just copy this, say marquee, loop through each of them, and then we'll create our timeline inside there. So instead of animating every marquee track, we only want to animate the one inside of the marquee parent that we're currently looping through. So we'll create a variable called track, and we'll set it equal to this.find. And let's go ahead and find sort of the marquee track element inside of the current marquee. So we'll just throw that class in there. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and set one up for items as well. We'll say let items equal this.find, and we can just find sort of the marquee item. So we're getting all the item elements inside the current marquee. So we have that set up now. I think the next thing we need to do is find out a way to make the number of tweens we have here dynamic based on the number of items there are inside this marquee. So we're looping through all the marquee elements. We're creating a unique GSAP timeline for each of them, but we need the number of steps we have here to be dynamic based on the number of items we have. So if we were to, basically we could nest a jQuery each loop inside of an each loop. So we're looping through the marquee. Maybe we're looking at marquee 2 out of the second one on the page. Well, we're going to grab the items inside that second marquee, and then we're going to loop through each of the items inside that second marquee, and we're going to create sort of a timeline point for each of those items. So this timeline point will only be created based on the number of items we have inside that marquee. So we have this index. It's basically counting them, and it starts at 0. So item 1 will be 0. Item 2 will be 1. It's basically counting them when it loops through them. So we need to create a variable called distance for our move distance, and we'll set it equal to the index plus 1. That way we just get it working again to where it doesn't start at 0. It's actually going to start at 1. So the very first item should have an index or a distance of 1 now. What we're going to do, wrap that in parentheses, multiply that by negative 100. So the first item, which is 1, will have a distance of 1 times negative 100, which will be obviously negative 100. Second item will now have an index of 2 times 100. That'll be negative 200. So we're essentially recreating this down here, but dynamically. And now all we have to do is replace the static number with the dynamic distance number that's being created for each of these items. But we can take this maybe a step further. What if we don't want to have to duplicate the word in the list? So we have design, develop, and build, and then we're having to repeat that first item again to make it seamless. But if you're using a collection list, that kind of wouldn't be possible. So let's delete that duplicate item. In this list, we have design, develop, and then design. So we're going to delete that last item, and then we're just going to use jQuery to create it. So what we can do is say items dot first. We'll grab the first item inside the current marquee we're looping through, and then we'll just clone it. We'll make a copy of it, and we'll append it. We'll say append to the current track that we're looping through. And let's also make sure that we're not animating every track on the page. We're only animating the track inside of our current marquee. So all that to say, we can now delete all of this, and we're creating sort of a unique interaction with a unique number of steps, all based on the items we have. So if I save that and this is published now, we should be able to refresh here, and we have design, develop, and then build, and then it duplicated that design word for us, and then it loops back around. So all that's being handled dynamically. And for the second example that only had 2 words, we have design, develop, it duplicated the item, and then it loops back around. And you can kind of tell, because if I highlight this word here, you'll notice that it instantly kind of slides back because it's 2 separate items. I don't know if I explained that part fully well, but anyways, actually it might be easier if I just inspect, and you can tell that. So even though we only have 2 items here in Webflow, on the live site we actually have 3, and the last one is just a duplicate of the first. So yeah, we have this interaction synced up. It works. We can reuse this marquee multiple times throughout the page with multiple varying numbers of items, and that's all set up and good to go. I left the clonable in the description below, so feel free to check that out, and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.